You're an idiot, Jane. We could have met. We could have hung out. Didn't you like the way we were hanging out? Adrian, what are you talking about? Are you kidding? Adrian looked at her with a mocking look. Listen, honestly, you're much more understanding in bed than you are in life. Did you think I was going to marry you right away? That's why you got knocked up. Tears came out of Jane's eyes. I didn't try, Adrian. I really didn't try on purpose. But since God gave us our baby, Adrian beat her to it. Well, since God gave it to you, go to your God. Let him raise it and feed it. Jane felt the world, so rosy and beautiful, crumbling around her. No, it just couldn't be. Adrian loved her. He read her poetry, said such beautiful words. Adrian, I don't understand. Are you leaving me? The boy put his hands up in the air. Don't you get it? It must be hard to live with such a slow brain. Not only am I dumping you, I'm trying to make it clear to you that you don't even try to get in my way. Do you understand? Here, take a break and don't whine. I'm sick of it. You should have thought of that before. Who do you think you are for me to marry you? And the baby? Do you think I want a child with someone like you? What child? Jane said it barely audible, but Adrian could make it out. From the gray masses. You see, there are people, and then there is the gray mass, which has lived in the swamp and will always live. You're such a gray mass in the village swamp. Adrian threw the envelope in her lap and went straight to the car. Jane jumped up, wanted to run after him. He must have misunderstood something. She needed to explain to him again, to tell him he was going to have a baby. But Adrian got in the car and drove right away. The girl looked at the envelope, picked it up, opened it. Dollars fell into her lap. No, after all, Adrian understood everything correctly. He even prepared himself for the conversation. She chuckled, and he might not have come at all. How much time had passed, she did not know. Girl, are you not feeling well? Jane looked up. Standing in front of her was a man in his 40s, maybe a little more. She did not immediately recognize him, but he recognized her. Wait, you're a student. Oh, sorry, I didn't recognize you. I'm sorry, I'll go. It was the teacher. She couldn't remember his name because he had only joined the institute this year. And Jane was already infatuated with Adrian and was completely uninterested in everything else. She quickly went from an excellent student to a mediocre one because she had no time for classes. She jumped up, took a few steps, and almost fell over. The man managed to pick her up. No, it doesn't work like that. Where do you live? In my dorm. That's the other side of town. He looked at his watch. Yeah, the subway doesn't work. Tell you what, nice girl. Why don't you come on back to my place and I'll make you some tea? You're freezing. Frankly, Jane had absolutely no strength to resist, so she obediently leaned on his hand and suddenly remembered his name. Thank you, Carl. Remembered then, that's good. What's your name? Jane. Jane, come on, Jane. There's my house over there. Jane looked around the apartment. Is beautiful, not pretentious, but beautiful. Everything in its place, pictures, capes on the couch, heavy curtains. It was as if she had been transported to the Middle Ages. Carl hummed embarrassedly, interpreting her look correctly. You know, when it's cozy at home, it doesn't feel as lonely. After the words about loneliness, Jane's tears rolled away on their own. Carl was at a loss. He understood, of course, that something had happened to the girl. Most likely a bad love affair. What else could happen at that age? But she was crying bitterly, as if her life was over. Modern youth and such strong love. And if not, what if the girl really lost someone? Anything can happen. He quickly sat Jane down in a chair. Let's have some tea. When Jane took her first sip, he asked, Jane, what happened to you anyway? You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but in my experience, it is much easier to talk. Jane looked at him and spoke. She talked and felt that, indeed, it did feel as if it was getting easier. But she was getting more and more tired, and by the end of the story, her nose was nodding off. Carl resolutely lifted her out of her chair. This is the bedroom. I'll sleep in the living room, and in the morning we'll decide how to proceed. You mustn't think any more tonight. You need a good, sound sleep, and not only you. Jane looked at him in surprise. How unusual to hear that. The man had casually shown concern for her child. In fact, that no one else even knew about. It was so unexpected, so nice. She fell asleep, barely touching the pillow. In the morning, she opened her eyes before she remembered. And as she remembered, she sat up abruptly in bed. God, what was she going to do? And Carl. The smell of coffee wafted in. Jane got up quickly, fixed her hair, and left the room. Oh, Jane, I was about to wake you up. Thought I'd have to have a cold breakfast. Thank you, I'm not hungry. Well, of course I'm not hungry. Sit down and eat. Jane smiled appreciatively and sat down on the edge of her chair. Carl looked at her. I'd like to have a serious talk with you. I think you should be interested in my offer. It's been 25 years. Have patience, Adrian, the ambulance is coming. Adrian wrinkled his nose in pain. The doctor had told him, if he didn't get the operation done in time, it could end very badly. He hadn't listened. And now, his personal doctor showed up 2 minutes ahead of the ambulance. Adrian. Okay, I get it. Where am I going? There's only one doctor who can work miracles. She works at the Mission Clinic. I'm already on the phone. Adrian leaned back in his chair. It was very unpleasant to realize that now his life would be in the hands of a little-known person, moreover a woman. He did not trust the fair sex very much. After his most beloved wife had tried not only to get away from him, but to take everything he had, and she had almost succeeded. Good thing his boys worked it out in time. Now he was alone, not old, rich, but all alone. He tried, of course, not to show how much pressure it all put on him. He had to fit in. When his parents were alive, it was somehow easier. And then they went on vacation. By the way, he bought them a trip. They wanted to see less developed countries, so they caught some kind of fever. While the doctors were figuring it out, they were gone. That was another reason to avoid medicine. The ulcer was found somehow unexpectedly, but it was not so critical. The doctor insisted on an operation, but he kept putting it off. Now he was waiting for an ambulance and did not know if he would ever come back to this office again. By the time they brought him to the hospital, he was almost unconscious. They sent him to the operating room right away. Thankfully, his doctor and all his paperwork came with him. Adrian even tried to pray, but he didn't know how to pray, so he just began to examine. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw white shadows scurrying by, the medical staff on whom his life depended. At one point, everyone lined up around the table he was lying on. Adrian felt a prick, and then a mask on his face, and met his eyes with the doctor who came over. Apparently, she was the one they had told him about. He recognized them at once. Those eyes only managed to whisper, Jane. And then he was lost somewhere. Jane Arkadyevna raised an eyebrow in surprise, stepped away from the table, took the papers, and read the name again. The last name Adrian, and she had never known, but immediately realized who was in front of her. Jane Arkadyevna, top-notch as always. Come on, it's just an ordinary ulcer. How many of them have we stitched up? You don't say. I watched some computer work today. Not one extra move or word. So Sin will set a record for the fastest quality operation. Jane smiled. Do you have a cigarette? Colleague looked at her with huge eyes. You don't smoke, do you? I don't smoke. But sometimes when I need to calm my nerves, I dabble. They went outside. The man held out his cigarette and lit it himself, then asked, Do I understand correctly that the man we operated on is an acquaintance of yours? Right. You know, I hated him for years. But you weren't allowed to operate on him. You couldn't. Who would have done it? Yes, that's right. It must be hard for you right now. I'll get out of your way. I don't think they're bringing anyone in yet. Jane was very grateful to her tactful colleague. For some reason, she remembered how Carl had proposed to her. Jane, I urgently need to go to work abroad. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But I can miss such an opportunity because in that clinic prefer to take people with families. I'm asking you to marry me. We'll protect you as a practice. You will give birth. I'll give the baby a name. Believe me, I won't hurt you. And you will have everything you could ever dream of. In 3 years, we'll be back. And then you'll decide whether to divorce me or leave everything as it is. She expected anything but that kind of offer. Carl said they had 1 week to think about it, and they needed it to get to know each other. They went out a lot, socializing, sitting in restaurants. Jane didn't understand why such a wonderful man wasn't married, and Carl prayed for one thing, that she wouldn't turn him down. His trip was a done deal, and whether he was married or not made no difference. They became a true husband and wife a year later. Not once did Jane ever regret his decision. 5 years later, they had a daughter, and Jane's son somehow grew up at once because he felt responsible for his sister. A few days went by. Jane tried not to appear in Adrian's room, but then she had to because the patient himself demanded the attending physician. You wanted to see me? I'm listening. Jane, how long are you going to pretend you don't know me? Adrian smiled and tried to take her hand. She gently pulled away and asked, If it's all questions for me, then I'll go. Wait, why are you such a little girl, remembering only what happened all those years ago? Everything is different now. Time is different and we are different. Are you married? Jane looked at him in amazement. He wasn't kidding. He seriously believes that Jane is still interested in him. She smiled. I'm sorry, Adrian, but that's none of your business. She turned and headed for the door. He even stood up on the bed. Jane, understand, I'll get what I want anyway. I always do, and I get everything. But she didn't even turn around. Flowers appeared in Jane's office every day with enviable regularity. She took them out to the nurse's station. Adrian saw it all, but he couldn't talk to Jane. So he decided to wait for her outside. Fortunately, he was already allowed to walk. He didn't ask anything about her. None of this mattered. He felt that now there was only him and her, and there could be no one else. As he stood there, he watched the birds. The sparrows fought while chirping loudly. Adrian thought, just like people. But he didn't get to watch the whole scene. A white Lexus rolled up almost to the very porch, and the sparrows scattered. A minute later, Jane came out. Jane, she turned to him. Adrian, what do you want? Jane, to talk, give me some of your attention. You have 2 minutes. And you've become violent. Jane, look, when I saw you, I knew nothing had changed. I still like you. I think we should try again. Jane laughed. What do I think you're not interested in? Adrian was surprised. But you love me so much. You just need to remember. Adrian, leave me alone. I really hoped I'd never see you again in my life. Jane wanted to leave, but Adrian grabbed her hand. Jane, you don't know what you're giving up. The door of the white SUV slammed, and a young man was next to them. Adrian froze, and in surprise, he let go of Jane's hand, standing in front of him, only young. "Mom, is there a problem?" "No, son, I'm fine." The man felt a little sick. "Let's go." "Yes, let's go." Dad and Zoe are waiting for us at the restaurant. Adrian slowly lowered himself onto the step. Something told him that no other attempt would succeed. The boy sat his mother down, then turned back to Adrian. He looked at him intently, and Adrian got a wave of hope that now the guy was going to be very interested in why they looked so much alike, and Adrian would confess everything. "Adrian, you see, I'm very inquisitive, and so I've known for a long time who you are to me. I beg you very much, do not come near our family. Otherwise, I will have to stop you from doing so. Good day." The car rolled away long ago, and Adrian was still sitting there. Well, that's it, happiness, full pockets of money, and contempt of someone who should not be in the world, because Adrian decided so.